So there's a spot open. So if somebody wants to join, just make a request. We'll let you in for a little bit. But
we'll also
let's
kick you out.
And we call kick you out.
Say something stupid. You going?
Just kidding.
You're going, boo. Where's the hook?
All right.
Where's my questions at? That's what we really want to.
So let's do it this way. Anybody who's on the live chat, go ahead and comment any questions you had or thoughts you had about the podcast or whatever in the comments. Just hit it down there, and we'll try to jump on it that way. But since the podcast, before people comment, have you guys got any questions you want to just go ahead and answer?
Or you can recap the podcast for them.
We could. We talked about cloud access control and how on-prem sucks. I'm just kidding.
There we go.
The pros and cons of on-prem versus cloud, running SQL servers, being like, wearing 1,000 different hats. That's what we do in the business, obviously. You guys all know that because we all do it. Sometimes we're good at it. Sometimes we're not, if we're honest about it. But cloud access control, just the trends in the network or in the industry, talked about. We really didn't get too much into the companies themselves. We did hit on OpenPAT and PDK a lot, but we weren't really like deep diving into, which cloud access control was better than the other or anything like that.
So I watched that the other day, with the whole cloud access versus server. And I don't know enough about it, but is there a hybrid, like a good hybrid that can stand alone, and if you want to do remote management type stuff, you can, but it also is based locally on the controllers?
I want to say, is it not Galaxy? What's another one that starts with a G? Not Gallagher or Galaxy. I think there's one other one out there that kind of has they have an on-prem that you can migrate cloud, but the only one I can think of right now outside of that is Open Options. They're a Mercury solution. They have cloud. Now I have not tested their cloud, so don't hear me be all about it. But they do have both. And
because I got a lot of customers that they don't want to add users. They don't want to change door schedules. They don't want to do this. They literally just want to unlock and lock their door.
Mm-hmm.
Especially some of these really small schools that I'm doing is, any kind of monthly, they don't know the budget for tomorrow, let alone the future. So, for them, it's really important. Hey, we've got a volleyball game tonight, and I want to unlock the door from, 4 until 7. And it's usually a coach or an administrator or something that would be responsible for that. So they don't need 100 users. They need just a couple people that would be able to remotely lock and unlock a door.
Mm-hmm.
So far, I've been using Access's camera station, or actually secure entry, because it ties to the companion app, so they're able to do that. And then now with the secure entry on camera station, you can do action buttons on camera views.
Yeah.
So since we're using door stations with cameras, it's easy just to add a lock, unlock, and then an access button.
Yeah, I think one of the most important questions in that for when you're getting down that road with the customer is how are they going to utilize it? Who's managing it? Who's the administrator? And how are they using the system? In my experience, like we talked about this, Nick talked about this, you can make an on-prem have some cloud-like features. You can do some port forwarding. You can do some things where you can access remotely. You can VPN, whatever. But things like true mobile app centric, usage, that you don't get out of an on-prem system. That's one avenue that's can be really important and a good selling point. And the other thing that I think about when you bring that up too is at the end of the day, you're presenting solutions to the customer and you have to give them options. You just have to educate them. What are the pros and cons of each? And at the end of the day, they got to make that decision. But, for me, I know I don't really lead with anything on-prem, in part because in truth, they're probably going to spend that same amount of money annually to do some type of SSA with most systems. Not every system may have that, but some type of SSA. So they're going to have a recurring license. But then for me, it's more about the serviceability of the system, remote versus on-prem. And And I think there's ways you can set it up. Like if you're controlling the switching, you're controlling the networking. If you have anything on site where you can set up an RMM or something like that, like you can still be, mostly remote for the troubleshooting and whatnot. So it's not like a cut and dry. This is this way. This is that way. But I think those are some of the things to consider.
Yeah, and I think even Phoenix has an on-prem option. It's like one of their I don't quote me because I'm still coming to Phoenix. I haven't
Come on,
too
you're
much.
Mr. Phoenix now. We got to quote you on this. What's up?
But I believe they have an on-prem option because I know they have a lot of like heavyweight certifications and some of them on-prem certifications. So I think there's like an option to run it on-prem, like point all the controllers to an on-prem server rather than pointing them to, a cloud server.
Yeah.
But it's a Mercury, right? That's a Mercury product. So
Yeah.
I think it's a nice mix of it. But like you said, there's some people who don't really take full advantage of it. And I think those are the kind of people you got to talk into, hey, what happens when you have something go wrong? Like you need remote capabilities. You've got to be able to, that door open because you got a football game or some kind of dance going on and you got 1,000 kids waiting outside to get into the auditorium or the gymnasium, and let these small schools because I know for a fact, because I have the alarms on some, municipality stuff, they budget for those costs. Like they don't always have capital expenditures. They have operating expenditures. All of the alarms and stuff like that we do for them, that's a yearly annual bill. So you got to hear what they say and know that there is a solution for it too. You know what I mean?
Right.
And Jeremy works in a unique situation for those watching. He's in a rural environment, like more small than medium business, and like school, some larger. You work in some larger what is it? It's like open warehouse type facilities.
Industrial type.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I do a lot of that, but like, let's say my school districts around here, the average school district, like their high school, has like 100 students or less.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, I mean, and there's some points where there's one school per county. And so it's like an elementary and a grade school, kind of in the same building or whatever it is. And I mean, their operating budgets are tiny.
Yeah.
It's like pulling teeth to get him to upgrade from Hike and Dowit. These trunk slammers from Kansas City and Oklahoma City and Denver have came out, and they're just stuck on this. Is like, okay, so I did this whole system for $10,000 10 years ago, and when you explain to them now, is like it doesn't matter whether you're using Access or the cheap Uniview or something like that. At the end of the day, they just see that as like, oh my God, this is $200 a month. We don't, and that's forever. If we don't decide not to do this, our hardware is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of them going, okay, we can do this for now, but let's say like they have to shut down the middle school for a year or two until enough students come back in. Well, one, they're not going to pay for it, and two, is that hardware is toast.
Yeah.
They choose not to pay for it, they got nothing.
Not everybody's hardware is toast. There's
No,
and
I don't mean toast because I know what you guys were talking about the other day on the cloud thing. I know it's not like locked out, but it's like if they go 2-3 years with not paying for it, I mean it's unused money that's sitting there. I mean it's kind of weird where it's just off prem or on prem, then they don't have to worry about it. They just don't use it.
I would say, dude, kudos to you for like listening to your customer and knowing them well enough, because like that's the thing. Like there's so many different solutions out there, and like it's really easy for us to get down these tracks and trains of like, this is what I do and therefore it's the right thing, but it's not always the right thing. Like it's just like we all have a niche market. We all have verticals we're better at. We all have customers that tend to like lean into certain veins. And even if it's from a relationship level, like somebody, we may have customers who tend to like oh yeah, I like dealing with this type of integrator versus that type of integrator. I want to deal with like, a Trican versus a Convergent or whatever, or vice versa, And so I think that's the important part of this discussion is that there are still really good systems that can do a lot of things, but
Like
how are they managed?
my example right now is like this big dairy project I'm working on. When I first initially had the meeting, I mean, this is a $500 million company. I mean, it's insane. And the first thing they said is, we want to do access control, but I swear to God, if you mention the word residuals to us, I'm going to kill you. I'm not. This project is done. And and I was like, I don't understand why. Like, we're talking like, let's roughly throw a number out there of like $13 a month per door.
Yeah.
And the guy says, we're paying $10,000 a month in software. We're paying so much in licensing fees for all this dairy stuff, and just he went on and on. His IT service is a monthly thing, the MSP's a monthly thing. And he was like, if I have to pay somebody to open my door, I don't want to do it. I'll just put on some smart locks from Home Depot and just put a code in there and change it when we need to.
Yeah.
So
changing it every week.
Right, and I was like, well, none of that is a viable option. And so what we came up with was basically, he was really sold on being able to open and close those doors, but not necessarily, like, he doesn't give a shit about adding a user at night. HR does that, and they got business hours for that. So I immediately went back to the access thing where it was like, okay, so you can unlock and lock your door. That's about all the remote access that you're going to get. And then if, code changes and stuff like that, that's going to be an HR thing. And she works a lot from home, but, it's no VPN, no crap. She just puts a client on her deal and uses Access's cloud, and that works for them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we're using cloud service, but not cloud hardware, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's remote capabilities, right? That's what you're really using, your remote capabilities. So it's not true cloud because
right.
An on-prem server, that server takes a crap and you're done. There's no backup. There's nothing beyond it. So it's the remote capabilities without the cloud. And I think you talked about this, right? It's not just spoon feeding everything to the client. The client's going to tell you what they want, or they're going to tell you what. And you as the integrator have to go through all of that and figure out and put together, design this solution for them. So in a situation like that, I mean, if a client just flat out told you, I'm not touching the cloud, you made a great choice for them because it gives them the remote capabilities without that cloud. But at the same time, you have to, I think, and Brandon said it really well, but I almost want to, read that YouTube again just to copy down what he said to tell to my clients because they fail to understand some of the things that you get with the cloud that you're going to miss, right? Even your on-prem server still needs to get all the updates. It still has to be cyber secure. It's got like all these things, the backups. Who's doing backup to those machines? I'll tell you right now, I'm staring at a server sitting right next to me that crashed, right?
Yeah.
So what happened? The recording server, not access, but I had to take it off site, rebuild it, take backups, build them a new server, bring them that new server. You know what I mean? Like all of them are just moving when you truly cloud. When you already taken that leap and go truly cloud, I wouldn't have had this problem. I probably would have crapped out at all because how to run redundancy. They're better at it. That's what I always tell people. They're way better than we are.
Yeah, I remember having this conversation with somebody from a cloud standpoint when they were kind of pushing back on because there used to be, it's less so now, but there used to be this concept of cloud was less secure for some reason. And I always push back and say you're telling me that you think that your small business IT management has, and usually they're not truly an IT engineer, they're not a network engineer. It's has better understanding of network infrastructures, better protocols, better safety, better backup than somebody who's literally working for Amazon's cloud servers, server farms. It's just not true. Those people are highly qualified, and there's so many layers of redundancy and accountability, unless you work for Verkada, then there's none. But
Point, because you got to take into consideration, like somebody like PA or OpenPath or something like that that's going to have cloud. They aren't going to sell you something that they haven't hired the cybersecurity team to go over, so that they aren't the next one in the news, because they're one time away from being on this little lot and like, can you believe this shit? Don't buy them.
Right. We have to start giving away Yetis for people to buy service.
Yeah, but hey, speaking of God, I want to get Jeff Day. Okay. So he's several questions that are really good. The first one he asked is, he's doing an 11-door takeover, and he wants to know what to look out for from an access control perspective. And the second one was, when it comes to residuals, is it easy for a client, like Jeff was talking about, sell 60 months up front of that cloud service, and they can re-up for years?
Can I answer the first part of this question, and I'll pass off the second part? Because we do a lot of takeovers, and I can tell you that there are always more headaches and probably more man hours than any fresh install, at least in our area, because the systems we tend to take over are very rarely done to certain standards. So a couple things I always look out for, and the things that I warn the customer of before I touch their existing install and try to take it over, is one, I'm not guaranteeing the usability of any of their wiring or their hardware. I will do a full evaluation like prior to, but I'm not taking like locks off of, I'm not going to drop a mag lock during a walkthrough to give them a quote, or pull strikes off. If I may like pull a strike off if it's simple enough, but those things, and like the physical doors themselves and how the doors have been retrofit in the past, are all things that if you don't kind of put out in the open ahead of time, so like really test the functionality of the doors and make sure before you touch them. And I know, because a lot of times we think, oh, takeover, I'm just taking over the head end, but you do really need to be aware of, especially if somebody's like throwing mag locks anywhere, that they've wired it to code. They've got, because we run into stuff all the time where people have like the push buttons run back to an input on the panel, and the mag just straight from power supply, and so like there's not a series run. They don't have time push to exit buttons, which were required in our state. It would be like 30 seconds. So I always say, like, check the door hardware like thoroughly, because once you take it over, to them it's your problem. And so be willing to do it. Like, it's a part of business, it's a way to grow your business, but it's not always as easy as you'd think to take over a system. And then two, my biggest recommendation is to, if like in many cases you take over the head end and the wiring looks like crap, a lot of times what we do, just so things are to our standard from even like the type of cable we use, we will actually splice all the existing cable at a clean point, like a junction point. So I may put like junction boxes on the wall and then like beanie every connection, or use bus bars or something to then land everything on our panels to like our kind of, like we use Genesis access control cable. So we may splice it all there, just so that we know from that point on, it's like kind of to our standard if we're not rerunning the cable. I'm not saying you have to do that, but for sure, just plan on spending a good bit of time at the head end, cleaning up the wiring and whatnot.
And not all head ends are compatible with each other, right? So there's things that people have wired in, or even just, you'd even think something like taking over one Mercury to another is very simple. It is not that simple. If you are new to this game, run away. Right? Run away. Because it's not that simple. There are features supported that others don't. It's never, they try to sell it to you as, oh, it's Mercury, boom, we can just put a new firmware on there, flip a switch. Never works that way. I'm telling you right now, the software is different. And like Kyle said, it's the field wiring that sometimes is a mess. So, you're looking at some of these systems, if you're looking at 65 doors and you have to go to every door and set it, sometimes it's just the same amount just to run it new. Because that's how much time you wind up spending. You got
Yeah.
things done correctly.
Yeah.
And it's what they say. If you're the last guy to touch it, you own it.
Yeah. And to that point, like, Kyle was touching on this as well, but like one thing that, first of all, takeovers are the way to get into the game, though. Like you're not going to just walk into access control if you're not doing it or if you're new to it and just get fresh installs out the gate for your first 30 projects. That's not going to happen. You have to have that kind of that experience, that portfolio, and that networking to get you in to those folks. So if you have to start on takeovers, one of the things that bit me early was kind of that touching it, then you own it, and now I have a troubled client because they think that these are my problems when these aren't my problems. And so one of the things that I began doing, that beginning huge, being the client spots that you're going to walk into and see the wire is just a rat's nest at the head end. Or you get out into the field and you notice that, they're not using bushings anywhere and they're cutting in on the aluminum with some of their, door wiring drop down. Well, if you can identify all that, and then, or especially door health 101, that's a whole topic. But if you can identify that, walk into the person and like hand them the site survey and say, I would love to put access control on for you. These are the problem points. Then when those problems do become problems and you're honest about them, they're much more forgiving. Like, well, I mean, I guess we saw that coming. I hate to pay another $2,400 for you to like rewire and get me new devices to the entire door, but you did tell them that. So that's like, but I didn't want to sound like we were all saying like, well, takeovers suck, because they did. But when you're new, like, you have to take those on.
Yeah.
I mean, even before you go that far, I mean, like, kind of how, I think even before you go that far with taking over on shit, I still think you need to adamantly say, if you've never done access control before, don't do it till you know what you're doing. Go out and buy a panel, a door strike, and put it on your garage. Something that, you know what I mean, is like, I've heard a lot of guys on there, and even like Instagram, everyone's asking me, like, how'd you get your start? How do you do this? And it's like, well, you have to know where to start, and that's like with yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, I've seen way too many guys that were like, oh, I'm taking this over, or I'm putting this in. What strike do I use? How does this maglock work? And it's like, you set it on your desk and try everything first, then go out and explore, or ask the community on this side. But just to be able to jump in and start doing access control and not have the long-term want to do access control, because a lot of people get frustrated with it and they're out. So, especially on a takeover, which most of the time leads to expanded doors or anything like that, you got to start smaller than that. You can't just jump in and do a 20-door system not knowing anything.
Yeah. And people ask that kind of stuff all the time. Like, they're trying to get into access control. Like, obviously, it's a good field. It's a good vertical to be in some sense. Like, but it's also one of the most difficult. And I know because I kind of cut my teeth in it. Like, I knew how to sell it before I knew how to install it. And so, another piece of advice that I would give that's kind of in line with that is, like, when you are in that kind of beginning phase, and particularly, and I think Barry, you'll appreciate this, with the door hardware side, is like it's okay to subcontract part of that too to somebody who does know that. If you have, like, I'm really big on creating partnerships. Like, what we do here from a, like, sometimes global level, but, like, stateside level, where, like, all of us are in different states and we're helping each other and stuff. Like, I have local companies that, like, I partner with. Like, we refer each other back and forth. We know each other. Like, we understand there's a ton of business out there. There's a lot of money to be made for everyone if you kind of, like, can own your lane and whatnot. And a lot of people don't like to say that. Like, they don't want to share. But grow up a little bit, man. Like, sometimes you need to share. You don't know everything. You're not the best at everything. When I started out, the thing that helped me the most is I found a locksmith who's on this. I think he's still on this right now, John. He subcontracted the door side install for me until I could kind of figure some of that out. And I still hire him for a lot of it, man. Like, I got a couple guys I've trained to do some of it. And then, some of the other stuff, I'm like, hey, I still want to pull you in on this because I think you're like, he's just good at it, and his team is good at it. And so, like, don't be afraid to do that.
You know what they say, smart people hire smarter people.
Yeah. So what about that second question? So, like, front loading an invoice with like 60 months of the cloud access, or I know that, like, from the MSP side, it can be a familiar format to come in, and what they'll do is they'll lease the equipment, and then you pay a monthly for 3 or 4 years to pay off your equipment. So they come in at, like, let's say $50 a camera, and that's paying for my labor to get my cameras up, and so many dollars for the head end and all of that. But the hardware is leased over a 3-year contract.
I personally like the annuals, right? Whenever I put in a system that's cloud, the first year is already accounted for. That's in the price, right? And then every year after that, I send them an invoice for the amount of doors that they have online, that kind of thing. But for me, and I'm not an MSP at all, and I know MSPs do a lot of that, loading it up. But I like the touch point, right? I like being able to say, hey, here's your invoice. Let's talk. How's the system working out for you? It's a touch point with the client to say, I'm still here. If you need anything, let me know. And then here's your invoice. And it's been so far so good. A lot of times they'll see the invoice, and then I'll get an email or phone call later, and they'll be like, hey, let's talk about this new door I want to put in or something like that. And one thing, I think Mike was still trying to get on. Jeremy, if you don't mind, I'm going to see if I can switch Mike for you.
Go for it.
Hey, if you want, I'll actually jump off. I'm packing up. I'm buying a house tomorrow, so I'm trying to pack up stuff, bro. I'll jump off and let Mike get on here.
Sure thing, man. Good to see you, Kyle.
All right, thanks, guys.
Mike, I know you're still there, so if you can try to request to join.
That A-team chain you got going on is just glaring me in the eye.
Bing.
Oh, the chain, huh?
It's like Mr. T's coming out, like, straight at my camera.
You know what, Jeremy, you missed the Philly event, so that's why the chain.
I know. I was hoping it would be here by now, but I went ahead and Amazoned one just so I could play the game too. Spoiler alert, but I saw that the cloud video the other day, and I was like, damn it, I want to play. Nobody invited me to this. Actually, you did invite me to the game. I just didn't show up. So next time I will have my gold chain on.
You better. Let's introduce Mike. Mike was originally going to be with us for the podcast, but had some difficulties with us getting on. Go ahead, Mike.
What's up, gentlemen? Sounds like a great conversation so far. Did everybody hear me?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we loud and clear.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation between on-prem and the cloud side of things. I think one thing that cloud brings to the table for a lot of clients is predictability of the cost, right? Compared to an on-prem system, it's like, who's actually going out and upgrading the firmware? Who's upgrading the server OS? Who's upgrading the software? Who's managing the client software? It's, all that's a cost that comes into a client, and it's typically going to be a surprise. I'm sure you guys have been in this situation where, a client's got this server that's not really, in a server room. It's not even a real server. And, the server dies, and then the client's got to fork over a bunch of money to deal with that situation, right? I think cloud really helps out. And I think that's the best time to have that conversation with the client as soon as they just lost the server. And everything's got to be reprogrammed, right?
Yes.
That's a huge point. And I'm rebuilding the server now, and these are all billable hours. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing this for free. So when they get that bill, it's like, well, was it equivalent to probably 2-3 years worth of cloud? Probably, yeah, it might be when I'm done with it. So that's the thing. You get that reliability all these things baked in. And I think something that we don't do enough in security is talk about where your cybersecurity profile fits into this thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Because it's so big. I mean, they're coming after everybody. I've got small businesses telling me about, they were held hostage and they paid up. And it doesn't make the news because they're paying up small sums, 3,000, 5,000. It doesn't make the news, but they're going after small businesses. And that's what people don't really, it hasn't set into them yet because it's not a big newsworthy story, but everybody's vulnerable, even at home. Like if you're not taking your cybersecurity seriously, you will be hostage. And yeah, it might cost you $3,000, $5,000, sometimes $10,000, depending on if they know who they've got, right? But a lot of times they hit these small businesses. The small businesses pay up, and they just keep it moving. It's just the cost of doing business. But you don't want to be a victim of that, right? It never pays off well to be a victim of that. It's bad for your customers. It's bad for you. It basically, when you see somebody who's been, victimized, what's the first thing you do? I'm never doing business with them. Right? You never want to touch them again with a 10-foot pole. So you got to put that protection on yourself and ask for more in terms of that. And these on-prem servers, I'm not saying they're vulnerable, but they're more vulnerable than a cloud is because you've got a whole team, like Bear said, dedicated to making sure they're patching all these holes. They're doing the log4j stuff. I mean, they're just fixing everything they can as fast as they can. Until you get a team big enough to keep that up on your on-prem servers, you're not going to be as good as they are.
Yeah.
Well,
it reminds me is like I was looking at this article today that was about the UK last year in 2022, the year of 2021. They got hit for 42% of the manufacturers in the UK had been hit at least once for anywhere from $50,000 to $260,000, and that's their manufacturer side of it, and that's almost half of the manufacturers were getting hit for cyber. So being able to pour it over, like you guys are talking about, into an access control and giving them a predictable cost, because it's not a win, it's not like an if, it's a win. So giving them that predictable cost, yeah, you're right. That is a good selling point, really.
Yeah, that's usually how I drive the conversation. I mean, do you want to be surprised with the bill, or do you want to know what your costs are going to be for the next 10 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. I mean, like I said, I'm taking notes of this too, because I would say I know access control, but in terms of being a salesman, you got to know all of these, pros and cons to be able to be effective. You know what I mean? Because it's really not so much convincing them to buy more. It's convincing them that to what you recommend, convincing them to get what you recommend, which is usually in their best interest. We all want to think that we do everything in our client's best interest. So you just got to be able to explain to them why this solution is pretty daggone good, and you should take it because it's probably the best thing for you.
So we kind of skipped over this question, but let me get back to, because I want to know where you guys what you guys think of as a broader spectrum of either front loading an invoice with a year or two on it, or leasing equipment and having them pay a monthly until they pay off the lease, if you will.
Well,
I think and I'll let you guys talk.
I mean, I think are you going to hold the note yourself? How soon do you want to make your money back? I mean, I know there's a video monitoring company, I won't name their name, but they specialize in auto dealerships, right? And their stick is they pay $3,000 to $5,000 a month and a 5-year agreement on that. They didn't start making their money back till year 2, 3. So, I mean, what happens if that company goes out of business? And plus, their motivation too, I used to totally go against them. Their motivation was to put the cheapest gear in they possibly could so they could get their money back as fast as possible.
Yeah,
but
probably.
they also turned around and they would offer the full service. Mr. Client would have an issue, they would call this company and they would remote in and pull the video for them. So it was really like security as a service. They were just trying to sell everything. But if I was going to do that, I would find a leasing company and have them hold the note, because I don't know if you guys dealt with those, But, you know, you work with a leasing company, as soon as the job's done and everybody signs off, you get a check. Then the client pays the bill, you know, and you're not the one holding the note.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a good point. We got another one in here. What's a good path to enter into the access control world? That's a tough one. So I would say it depends on what your background is, right? If you're an IT guy looking to get into access control, then I would say your smart thing to do is to partner with somebody, either with locksmiths or hardware companies. There's a lot of door companies that do doors and they do really well, and they don't want to do anything else. I myself partner with other door companies when the repairs get too much, right? When we got too much work going on. But access control, because it's got life safety, because it's got locksmithing in it, because it's got all these facets, it's a lot of cutting, you know, the metal work. I wouldn't say, you know, hey, just pick up a book and read it and jump into access control. No, I would say partner with other companies that, you know, can do some of the work for you. And like Kyle said, sub it out, right? Go ahead, sub out some things that you don't know how to do, bring some in-house talent in if you can, you know, people who learned how to do this, and build that way, right? Sub it and bring in talent. And that way I think you can build up to where you'll be doing access control successfully.
And on that, I also think it doesn't hurt, like, to start small. You know, pound the pavement for those small mom and pop one-door shops. You know, that's where you can convince them. It's like, hey, you know, particularly these days with the employee turnover rate, I can eliminate your key problem. I can eliminate your hardware replacement. One door, one system, easy to maintain, in and out. And that's how you get a lot of different types of doors to learn on, but you're also not overwhelmed with larger systems right away.
Yeah, that's exactly how I did it too. And you know what, man? I wasn't below it. I went and handed out flyers at those strip malls with one door.
Yep.
They had a door in the front and a door in the back. So maybe you score 2 doors and it's a good day when you're first getting in there. You're like, I got 2 doors. So
exactly.
And you know, also the nice thing is like if you're getting into it and you're coming more from like the grassroots of things, of either maybe you're in the locksmithing realm of it, or you've done alarm but you've never done access, like you can really boost I guess your reputation and your trust if you're already pouring into local. So if you're already going to local coffee shops, if you're already going to these local areas and doing things, or maybe your kid takes Taekwondo or something, you can approach those people and they'll often be a lot more lenient because you might mess up the first time or cut a strike too wide and you got to bondo it and paint it and not put it on Instagram. So, but you might have to do something like that. But yeah, just going out there and pounding the pavement is the way to go if you're just getting into it.
You know, my experience, I was a technician for a long time before I started my company 15 years ago. And I focused specifically on video surveillance for a long time because I realized that once you get into access control, if somebody's front door is unlocked at 4 o'clock on a Friday, you better get in your truck and get out there and fix it on Friday. If somebody's camera's out at 4 o'clock on a Friday, majority of the clients are fine with you showing up on Monday. And that weekends, 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, you got to be prepared to service your clients. And that's one of the biggest things. And I also think, you know, access control, there's a part of it learning the software, learning networking, but then there's the locking hardware, and then there's the physical doors. You know, how many times have you shown up at a client's, you know, site and they're like, I want access control on this door. I'm like, it won't even close. We got to replace the door first before we do anything else. So there's a lot of nuances with getting in the access control space. And, you know, I think you got to pick your, you know, probably learning the systems first, and then, you know, partnering with, you know, a locksmith or somebody who can help you out the doors and door hardware.
And don't be afraid to walk away from a project. You know, just because somebody asks you to do something, that doesn't mean you have to be a miracle worker to do it. That's not going to be 100%. You know, it's pick and choose your battles. Like you were saying, with the door that doesn't even close. You know, I mean, there's a lot. What if you run into a glass door that you have no idea how to do it? Are you going to risk breaking the door, or are you going to say, I honestly don't have that, let me refer you to somebody else? Or let me get, like you guys are saying, is get a hardware guy in there or something. But know your bounds before you just jump in and dedicate something that you can't back up.
Yeah. I've been in situations where we do, a main entrance to a large building with, automatic openers, and somebody else put the doors in, and we put the access control. Guess who they call when there's a door problem? Us. Right. As soon as you touch the door, it's our problem. Whether the door's opening or closing, the door closers, and then we have to deal with that whole situation. So that's one of the biggest challenges I've seen in access control.
And know your code. Handicap entrances, push buttons into that. It's. Yep. I actually just ran into a school where they had some guys put on access control with mag locks and no egress for handicap access, and it's like, who did this? I mean, it's not even legal, let alone like the shoddy work that was done. But at least I knew that I could call an automated door opener guy to get, some relays figured out for theirs, because they ended up with wireless buttons and all sorts of stuff. But I didn't know the hookup and regulations of them automatic door openers until I called somebody else. Now I do, but in the meantime, I just chose, I can't do that. I got to call somebody else. I still kept the client, and they actually had me do a lot more doors, because the first one I did said, this is out of the realm of code. I don't know what it is. Let's go back to the drawing board and see what we got to do this right.
And I think that like just this last 2 minutes has really summed up that the access control really has a lot of those moving parts that Mike was talking about. Like that you have to, it looks easy from the outside because you just see the card reader and it opens the door and you see a mag lock and you're like, oh, maybe I can get into this. But you're not taking into consideration that door health. You're not taking into consideration knowing those codes and knowing what access control to put on it and how to build the pathway back to the head end and how to wire the panel. I mean, there's a lot to it. So I really do think that if you're going to get into it, it does start with that heavy, like uphill curve of like learning and reading, and like reaching out to those guys and going, one way that I learned a lot about access control is I had an SES and an ADI near my home, and they'll put on like product classes, right? And it's not an access control class, so like don't take it into that realm of it, but you can go into it and sit down. Let's say that there's a sales rep there from ZK Techo, and he's going over like why you should buy his panel over something else. And so it's really good in those, because you'll get other guys that are older guys that maybe don't know about ZK Techo, and so they thought they'd spend the 45 minutes because they're getting a donut and a Diet Coke out of it. And they'll sit down and they'll listen to it. And if you ask dumb questions in those courses, that's where I learn the most, because the sales rep doesn't know shit, right? He's just trying to sell his panel. But the guy sitting next to you, done it for 45 years, likes to hear himself talk, and he'll be like, oh, that's a normally open circuit. And it's like, oh, really? And it's like, yeah, you got normally closed, it works like this, normally open, it works like, and you can really reap some good information from those things. So check your local distributor to see when they're putting on, manufacturer sales rep meetings, and you get free lunch out of it sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. We got another one in here. I want to make sure we get our questions, because that's what this was all about. King Tech, what are the top 5 control panels to use? That's a tough question, because almost everybody is using a proprietary panel, and then there's the exception. I think you got HID makes the Vertex, the Evos, the new one is called an Aero. Those are usable by other big systems. You've got your Mercury, you've got your HID, but beyond that, I think everything is going to be pretty much proprietary. Axis has a panel that is open API. Not everybody's adopted it. I think Gentech adopted it, Camera Station adopted it, a few adopted it, but not everybody adopted it. Anybody want to add to that one before?
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
ZK Techo's coming up a lot, I've seen. That's a hot name I've seen coming around a lot.
But that's also proprietary.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
All right, next one. Do you guys in the USA and Canada need a security license to install access control and other security? That is based on local jurisdiction. I can tell you in Maryland, absolutely you need a security license, you need a low voltage license. You need a whole bunch of licenses and a lot of background checks. And I'm sure in other jurisdictions it's going to be similar, and some of them are loose and some of them are worse.
Yeah, I mean, out in Kansas and Missouri, it's the wild, wild west, man.
You need a screwdriver.
You need a screwdriver. No license.
That's about it.
Look,
Nope.
I'm getting printed 3 times a year to do security here, so.
You don't even need a driver's license to do doors. Bear does that.
Yeah.
PA is pretty much the
Van
same.
will install.
Yeah.
What else we got, Mick?
I'm scrolling through. Come on, guys, keep them coming. Off topic. What's with the change?
I got a question. Do you guys have better luck with your cloud monthly billing annually, or does the customer take to it a lower number easily on the month? What's your average?
I only do annually. It is way too much work to mess with monthly bills.
Yep. I forget what the cost is to send an invoice for a business, but it's a lot more than you think. It's like $20-$30 per invoice that you send out your cost.
Yeah, annual's the way to go. But do make sure that you set up, because you can usually do this in like FreshBooks or QuickBooks or something. You can set like a couple week reminder so you don't just because they.
And a lot of the stuff, like instead of just doing yearly, I also try and sell 1, 3, or 5 years up front. That way, again, hey, Mr. Client, you buy 3 years. You don't have to think about this again for 3 years, or buy 5 years up front. You don't have to think about it. We've been pretty successful doing that also.
Oh, here's a good one. What types of readers are you guys using? Readers, baby.
So once upon a time, I fell in love with HID signals, and especially the little terminal block that they put on their readers. It was awesome. And then HID disappeared, and you couldn't touch one for 2 to 3 years on the wait list or whatever it was. It was ridiculous. Right now, I would tell you, I'm using wavelengths on just about everything.
Okay.
What about you guys?
Anything with a pen pad. I hate non-pen pad readers. That's just the thing.
They got them numbers on there, and about three years into it, you can tell they don't have a 7 in their digits. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But
But I've had way too many customers that come back and like they want their stupid cleaning lady to have a PIN number and not a card. They don't want to deal with cards. They don't have the manpower to either print the cards or enter them into the system. It's like, it's take the guy's PIN number out at the end of the day. Then you don't deal with cards at all. And most of the time, I should say 99% of the time, I just put a reader with a PIN number on it. Whether it's mullion mount or box, I don't care.
I'll tell you reader-wise, it's about to change the game, okay? It's ST lowercase ID. So they come from overseas, and they're already like super being used everywhere else. But they can customize it, that they send it to you, and it's running OSDP, and it's running this, this frequency or that frequency, and they've got things that you can like slide in and connect to the bottom of it. If you're looking for QR codes or you're looking for something like that, you can have it like slide out and then slide in a touch screen. If they want to upgrade their readers from just a reader to a pin pad, you can unslide it and slide a pin pad onto it. You can the readers that don't have pin pads on them, they will custom print your logo on them, or they'll custom print them to, like, if you want it to blend into the wall in like a really high-end museum or something like that, you want it to be that wall color, they can screen print it, come out, bam, you can't even see it on the wall. And they're doing some crazy cool things if you look into STID readers. And they're also. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say my favorite reader is the one I can actually get right now.
Which STID? They have a ton just sitting on the Texas last hour.
Yeah, they just added them to a Vigilance parts list, but I haven't got one yet to play with. Somebody was telling me Allegion readers last time they heard was like 60 weeks out.
Oh, Lord.
So, and I know the HID Signos, they're just finally starting to get back in stock. That's been a major challenge, especially for large enterprise clients with different systems, and you're just dealing with different credentials. And we didn't even talk about credentials. That's the worst part of access control, in my opinion.
We don't even have the time to touch credentials and something like this. You need questions just on credentials.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge, especially if you're getting into access control. Understanding credentials is because I talk to so many different clients, and it's like, it's just this thing. I show up, I'm like, there's so much technology behind there. You got to get your head wrapped around, which is a challenge. But I'm a big fan of the mobile credentials. I think that eliminates, like what you were saying. Getting credentials from one side of the town to the other, or getting them to people. If I can just shoot a link or just add somebody and they get a notification on their phone and you can manage it that way, that's been popular for us.
Yeah, and the other thing with STID is actually when you buy the reader, if you buy the readers and you put them on your site, and then you get your employees to download the app, it comes with a mobile credential on it.
But
Now,
but
go ahead.
How do you manage that though? Is that like a separate, do you have two databases then you got to manage? How does that integrate? Again, I know it's on the Vigilon price list. I haven't had a chance to play with it with ACM, but that's been one of the challenges. Like when the original HID, like the twist, came out, you had like a whole separate database to manage outside of your access control system, which was a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Well,
at that point, you look at it from like the third party view. So it's like your mobile credentials are through the STID system, right? And I know that adds one more browser or something like that. But the fact that you would have to maybe your access control manufacturer buy those credentials, STID giving them with the app. And I mean, you assign it to somebody. You can't just like get on there and have one and use it. But
it's kind of like wavelengths too, right? Because they give away their mobile credentials. Yeah, same thing. Yeah, that's what, when I found OpenPath years ago, and it's like, wow, like I manage my mobile credentials all in the same interface. Like this is cool. It's simplified things. So that was one of my favorite things of OpenPath.
Yeah. So we had another question. How are you guys managing the chip shortage and the cards? I would say this, for chip shortage, if you're looking to get anything that is a dual communication, that's prox and high frequency, forget about it. You're not going to be able to touch it. Anything that's dual is just untouchable right now. So I would say, if you don't really have a need for prox, move away from it.
Yeah.
Move to high frequency. Unless there, 1,000 users already out.
There's the flipper.
Hey,
how many of you bought that when you saw it on TikTok? Don't lie.
No, one of my guys that worked at in support, he bought one, and I got one because I show clients. I literally pull this out, and I like, show me your card, and I'll clone it for him, and then it's like, oh, this is the real problem.
I learned about it because a high school teacher called me and said, I caught one of my students with this. What does this do? And I'm like, you got a problem. You got a very big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the Home Depot near me, on the outside, as you walk in the main entrance, there's a sticker. It says, "We copy key fobs."
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
It's like those mobile key stations in Walmart that you can copy. The next thing is going to be like, bring your key card. We'll do that too.
Yeah.
It's exactly what they have at Home Depot. It's a kiosk. You stick it in, it spits out a new key. And I think it's education, because I bring it up to clients because clients don't understand card technology. And I have like a whole deck of them, and they're all different technology right here, right? And an uneducated client's going to be like, oh, they're all the same, but they're all different. And we're dealing with technology from the 70s when it comes from prox that was never designed to be secure.
No, you're right. It wasn't. It was like having a regular key in your pocket, easily copied, easily distributed.
Yep. And a lot of people don't understand too. When I clone your key, it doesn't say, hey, a cloned key was used. It's not how it works. It's identical. The system doesn't know if it's a real key or if it's a clone key.
Right. And that's why we're going to make the plug. That's why you tie in your surveillance with it.
Yeah. But then you have somebody monitor it too.
That's my
right?
big thing is how much you can get out of access control with your other verticals. I mean, 99% of the time they're like, well, can we see it? Yes. We can either do a door reader with a camera on it, or we can put a camera right behind it. The whole thing, it's like you want to do an intercom on it. Well, I can get you an intercom keypad camera combo, or we can do a comlet with a door strike and a camera. The options are endless, but it's not just access control you're selling security. And I think that if you're not taking advantage of all those verticals, you're leaving way too much on the table.
Yeah, which I'm really excited for, just the security industry as a whole, that they're moving more to the full security idea. It was just a decade ago that it was like they were complete different systems. So they took different pitches, and people went shoddy on this one and okay on that one. And then it was like the industry itself didn't have an easy time selling a holistic that would be meeting the needs of the client or the system of the site. And now with the integrations that you got from just like what's been mentioned, like OpenPath and Ava, for instance, like the integrations that you can get out of your surveillance, out of your access control, and how easy it is to just tie into your alarm or your intrusion. I mean, we're really moving to a day where if we capitalize on it and it doesn't just get, it doesn't just become trivial and marketable, and we do whatever we can to get it in, then we can really start providing true, a security mindset to the entire site.
Is anybody?
Or go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll go after you.
I'm just in perfect reference to that, and what I'm talking about is an older school that I took over. They had an AI phone and an access control reader and a hike vision camera, and I can't remember what the other box was. It was something even older. And at the end of the day, we changed everything out to one box that's a single gang mount. And it just, I got them for all of that. I got a camera license out of it. I got a door controller license out of it. We got an intercom license out of it. So, not only did we clean up the outside of the building with all these buttons that nobody knows which button to hit with one device, and it was just a good move. I mean, and I think a lot more vendors are starting to come out with those things. So use them, take them to your advantage.
Any of you guys using or installed Alcatraz or Safer yet?
Mm-mm.
So, did you guys know what Alcatraz or Safer does? Ever heard of it before? So,
Nope.
Alcatraz came out with it's basically face rec at the door, but it's pretty unique. It basically sits in the middle between the readers and your panel. So, basically, you issue somebody a credential, right? Like you normally do. After the Alcatraz installed, you take your credential, you present it at the reader in enable mode. And when you present your reader, it tells you to move your face around just like you do on your cell phone. And then it basically it associates your credential to your face. So then when you walk up to the door at that point, basically you just have to present your face. It's cool. It has tailgating detection built into it also. So it can differentiate if somebody follows you in or if somebody uses, other different things there. But it's a unique solution. Unfortunately, it's kind of pricey, but I like where that's going. And Safer is another one that's coming out with one. I ordered one. I'm waiting to play around with it, but they're integrating an intercom also. And you can pull the video from these all in your video surveillance system too.
Yeah.
That's
dope.
Question here. Any codes to study other than NEC? Wow. Okay. That's life safety. Oh, Bear answered that one. You got IBC, and I would say get familiar with your fire codes too, right? Because that's going to play a part in it. Your fire code. So that's 72. I think it's NFPA 72.
Yeah.
Right?
72.
Hold on, I got it right here behind me.
NFPA 72 or?
Yeah. And then figure out which version your jurisdiction is using. But definitely the fire code plays a big part in what we do in this part. There's a lot of fire alarm integration. It gets into, your big commercial spaces. So you need to be with those fire codes. I mean, I wouldn't say read the whole book cover to cover, but, be familiar with the relays, where the relays are supposed to be, that kind of stuff, and how to trigger them and test them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm probably out, boys, but I have really enjoyed this conversation. And I hope that this is something that Tech Knowledge continues to do. Because I feel like the people watching have been really interactive and really enjoying this.
I I'd like to see it go into all the verticals, security, cameras, structured wiring, services. It's really nice to hear different people's, views and opinions on all these different markets.
So I'll tell you this, Jeremy. So sneak preview, we're going to talk cloud cameras, and we're probably going to talk a little bit of cameras for our next podcast when we do it. Because I think, what's that? Is that the Ava?
It's the Ava Mini.
I'll join it because I'm not sold on cloud cameras either. So
it looks like.
I'm surprised nobody asked about the bandwidth on these cloud access control systems.
I'm surprised people haven't asked a lot of questions on cloud-based cameras.
But I'll give you the hint. Cloud-based access control, peanuts. I'm talking less than 10 gigabytes a day.
Yeah, you can run a cell connection super easy. I look forward to the cloud cameras. That's my forte. I know access control, but that's not. I don't know all the codes and everything. But yeah, I love that. Was that Cradle Point?
It's a Cradle Point. I've been running, pop-up access control just off of this, and it's peanuts.
I'd love to talk about that. I'm a huge fan of PepLink. We got a project. We're going to be bonding 16 5G connections and 4 Starlinks together for a client. PepLink's got some really cool stuff when it comes to cellular stuff. So, but yeah, I'd love to talk more cloud stuff, more cloud cameras. There's so many options on the market, and there's so many new options that pop up, and then you throw analytics on top of that. It's a lot of fun, man. It's a lot of fun.
It's an exciting time.
I'll see you guys later, though. Good talking to you.
Hey, you know what?
Nice to meet you, man.
Everybody's time. We said we'd do it for an hour, and we're over an hour. Well, fun. Thanks everybody for calling in and answering questions, and you guys out there asking questions.
Yep.
And if you keep a question going, just send us a DM or send us messages, and we'll see if we can still answer whatever you got. Any final thoughts, guys?
Hey, I appreciate you guys letting me join and meeting everybody. Huge fan of this industry. Love this industry. I have a huge passion, so I love meeting other people who have the same. So nice meeting everybody.
Yeah, good.
Awesome. Guys. Tech knowledge.
Thanks, guys.